All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to day 3 of the 12th annual AWE USA. So psyched to be back up on stage, seeing actual human beings. I hope you all are too. One of the first shows probably for most of us, and it's just fantastic to be back. So today in the main stage, we got a full list of spatial computing and XR discussions, panel talks. Couple of reminders, if you haven't, it's day 3, hopefully you've got it already, but at the awe.live app, get your agenda, network, and for those of you who are trying to earn some free prizes, get busy because there's still time to win those. Also today we have the event wrap-up, the Augie Awards. I believe that's at 3:45, so come back here for that. That's always a great celebration of the day. Obviously, these events couldn't be possible without our sponsors, so we want to thank our gold sponsors, Arbor XR, CareAR, a Xerox company, HP, Metamaterials, Plug XR, and of course even bigger thanks to our titanium sponsors, Niantic, Qualcomm, and Unity Technologies. All right, so let's get started today. Our first panel is a good one and very, very timely. So our first panel today is Metaverse, Privacy, Security, and Safety in the Era of Constant Reality Capture. So let's bring out our panelists here as I introduce them. All right, so we have Christina Podnar. She's a digital policy advisor, Native Trust Consulting. Christina is a digital policy innovator for several companies across the world, delivering them from risk and internal chaos into liberated innovation. Check out her book, The Power of Digital Policy. Next up, we have Dennis Bonilla. He's the co-founder and CTO of Balto Solutions, which has a platform to reduce workforce training. Dennis is adjunct faculty at ASU, Media Systems Advisor for XRSI, and co-chairing the Privacy Framework Group. And last but not least, we have the founder and CEO of the XR Safety Initiative, better known as our Cyber Guardian, Kavya Perlman. Kavya is annually named one of the top cybersecurity influencers in the XR and spatial computing space, co-host of the immersive podcast Singularity Watch, and founder of the Cyber XR Coalition, focusing on diversity, inclusion, and cybersecurity in XR. Very excited for this. Good luck, guys.
Thank you, Lance.
Enjoy.
Thank you.
Thank you. Web 1.0 was made by the idealist. Web 2.0 was made by the capitalist. Who will build the next iteration of the internet? It was a rhetorical question. Web 1.0 was sharing information. Web 2.0 was connecting people. What will we do with Web 3.0? And it is my honor today to discuss with you the very question, and then how we will go about building it, and how we will solve the very core issues of privacy, cybersecurity, and safety as we build the next iteration of the internet called, we've all heard about it in the past few weeks. If we could play the video, please.
The meta, no matter the meta, the meta, the meta, the meta,
the metaverse,
the meta, the meta, no matter the matter, the meta,
study in the meta,
the meta,
the meta,
the meta, the meta,
functioning meta,
the meta, the meta, generation meta, the meta, present, present, presence, presence, present, presence, present, presence, presence, present, present, presented.
So, a lot of buzzwords, right? And that's why I have the honor to bring together with us our experts. I'm going to go over to Dennis, Christina. Dennis, I know Lance kind of talked about, what you do with, you're the CEO of Balto, CTO?
CTO.
CTO of Balto Studio, and we've been working on this privacy framework together. Anything that you want to say about, the preface, like what are your introduction, or, what are you doing with the studio, as well as how it connects with privacy, safety?
Sure. So I spent about 12 and a half years building data visualization simulation software at NASA, and really to help engineers get ready for very complex stacking and fitting operations so that they could actually visualize it in three-dimensional space. And so after that, I went off and co-founded a company called Balto Technologies with a couple of friends, and we were building ad hoc software. We often get calls for solving kind of impossible things. Here's a thing in 3 dimensions that's very difficult or can't be solved. Can you guys help us? And we have since moved on to actually thinking about advanced manufacturing and workforce development. And so what we're looking at are using these immersive systems to help people learn faster. Essentially, our mission statement is to train anyone to do anything. And so as I was looking around at these standards, interoperability is the buzzword of the last week. That is, NASA lives and dies with interoperability, modularity, and extensibility, and that's kind of the name of the game. That's how it's worked for several decades. So I'm very happy to hear you all using those words. And as I was looking for those standards, I saw that in the commercial space there weren't really standards. And of concern for me really was people's personal privacy and secure information, what they call PII in the federal government, personally identifiable information. And I stumbled onto XRSI, and there was a couple of working groups that happened to have Zoom meetings going, and the password posted publicly before we started getting Zoom bombed last year. I think everybody suffered at least one of those incidences. But I hopped on and realized that folks like Christina and folks like Kavya were on those calls, brilliant, absolutely brilliant human beings that are thinking about other human beings and how they work with those systems. And so I'm now the co-chair of the Privacy Framework Working Group. So what we're trying to do is just create standardization around those protocols when we're talking about securing human data and these immersive systems.
And Dennis, I have to say, I'm so impressed with your credentials, but to me, you would always be Erin's husband, an amazing human being who actually helped 4 of our astronauts, and she actually trains astronauts. She helped the first African-American woman, Dr. Sian Proctor, who recently went up to space with Inspiration 4.
Thanks.
And so you would always be Erin's husband to me.
Thank you.
And so Christina, over to you.
Great. So as everybody heard earlier, Christina Podnar, I am something that we call a digital policy advisor. And I got to be that by getting involved very early with the web development space. My claim to fame is that I broke a lot of things just because I could. I single-handedly blew away the St. Jude website, kept it down for 8 hours. I took the first trick-or-treat batch of UNICEF credit card donations and just clear texted them to the bank for processing. But it was all good. It was 1998, and we were doing crazy things and breaking things. But as the years went by, I realized that we need to grow up, right? The web's growing up, we need to grow up. And we need to start being responsible citizens. We can't be doing crazy things and breaking them. And so I realized we really needed a framework. We needed something that is going to be more than shelfware, right? Those are the 37-page PDFs that usually get put up on your SharePoint. People point you to when you need to do something. They're like, hey, go read the guidance. So I actually created a methodology around digital governance and digital policies that speaks to organizations in terms of balancing risk and opportunity. The idea is let's create a framework that we can all be free to innovate and create within because we know what the boundaries are. It allows us to continually work with great velocity, be effective and efficient without having to continually ask for permission or have to think about, gosh, is this the right thing or not the right thing to do? Because we know where we have to stop, where the boundaries are, and in the meantime, we're just free to create. So it's a good place to be in, but again, balancing that risk and opportunity is key, and that's what I do.
Amazing. And I have the honor to work with these amazing experts, as well as so many of the XRSI folks in the crowd. All right. So let's dive into the metaverse. As we heard, a couple of weeks ago, there was a lot of conversation about the metaverse. This is a slide from some of the research that XRSI advisors, myself included, we conducted, and we came up with our understanding of the metaverse. This research paper is available on CISO.org, which is Simulation Interoperability Standard Organization. Thanks to you, Dennis, for pointing that out. That's an organization that develops standards for NASA. So we presented this research over at CISO Symposium a few weeks ago. I was in Denmark presenting it. We can't confirm, but 2 weeks later, the integrated visual augmentation system, IVIS, came to a screeching halt. because all that data, and we just kind of laid that out there. So the metaverse has been called the successor state to mobile computing, as well as Web 3.0. However, just as the phones did not replace desktop computers, the metaverse will increasingly come to dominate user time and attention. Instead of scrolling through two-dimensional spaces and screens, users will spend more of their time in the digital experiences that are three-dimensional, immersive, and increasingly indistinguishable from reality. In practice, the metaverse is generally defined as this persistent, shared three-dimensional space, and of course, it arose from this popularity, the pop culture, the snow crash, the Ready Player One. In practical, however, as you see all these acronyms, the metaverse will evolve based on the convergence of all of these technologies. And you can see AR, VR, 5G, edge computing, improved graphics, computer hardware, all these things will have such a role to play. And of course, interoperability. We have heard from the Meta, Facebook, touting interoperability, but I want to point out, interoperability does not mean intraoperability. And that's something to absolutely look out for, what goes on there. So therefore, the metaverse now, according to our understanding, represents an interoperability between diverse spatial systems, allowing the flow of user data, commerce, and ability to go across 3D spaces. With that, though, I know, Dennis, when we first started, it was like about taxonomy, and as we heard from the CEO of Meta, there was a lot of presence, metaverse, a lot of these spaghetti of terms going on. You and I have discussed about these taxonomy. What do you have to say about that?
I think it's really important for us to be using the same language. How many different companies and developers and backgrounds and schools are being represented just in this room, much less the conference, much less the planet, and just getting on the same page and using the same languages and symbols, I think are going to help us really understand how we're going to interface these complex systems and our responsibilities when we do. So yeah, I was all in on the taxonomy development that you all were doing, and I think it's absolutely important because some of these words and some of these concepts have existed for 60 years. We've been launching people to other celestial bodies for 60 years now, and there is some standardization there in the department in the United States around these complex three-dimensional systems. And if we're not using those words, or at least augmenting or understanding those words, then it's going to be really difficult for us to be able to change pre-existing systems, much less build new ones.
And I want to play that video. If we could play the video for the one that you shared,
yeah.
Dennis, have lined that up.
Right, so what this is a visualization of people dying in a video game. And these are all death by impact. And so what you're seeing is data being visualized around the telemetry, and I'll describe what that is later, around the telemetry that users are producing. And it's very easy to tell that there are natural structures and unnatural structures, human-made structures that exist that we interface with every day. We've all talked about digital clones. There you have something like a shadow of reality being created by the digital clones impacting that reality. And yeah, so I was saying telemetry. What telemetry essentially is, for those that are unfamiliar, is remote measurement, right? So telemetry, you're creating telemetry when you're moving through space-time. Every moment that's being remote sensed is being written to a log or to a file or some database somewhere, producing telemetry for you. And 20, 30 years ago, most of us were not producing a whole heck of a lot of telemetry. We're now producing orders of magnitude much more than we were even a couple of years ago now with these mobile computing devices in each of our pockets. It's something like several terabytes of data that we're producing now, where it was only a few gigabytes even just a few years ago. As we think about constant streaming reality, we're looking at potentially terabytes and petabytes of data that we'll each be producing. The power that you have and the responsibility that you now have given that power, you can do really amazing things. So for instance, pattern life analysis, you could take some of that telemetry and recompile it in a different way, look at it in a different modality, and start to predict. I mean, and this is what we've seen over the last decade. Start to predict human behavior. Humans are not super complex animals. So pattern life analysis is part of that. Biometrically inferred data. So now that we have these remote sensors that are being carried on our bodies, our watches are now remote sensors. All our computing devices have cameras. Some of them now really producing really intricate data like LiDAR sensors. These glasses that we're talking about potentially will include those types of sensors, and sensors that we probably won't even, we won't even understand until we get there. I know that there's a lot of work being done in the auditory space, and I mean, imagine being able to see in infrared. I mean, those are things that humans can't do right now. And what does that mean for our given our responsibilities in maintaining that data and what we can infer about each other? And so that's part of, part of my shtick and why I really wanted to be part of this panel. So thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Kavya.
And so we start with building the consensus, and then Christina, you are the czar of digital policy, talking always about digital transformation and guiding all these global governments together with us. You've helped us, build COPA reform. You've contributed to that. So what is your take on, what is it going to take for us then?
So here's the thing. I think what we have to do is realize that we've been breaking things long enough. The web's been around for 30 years, right? We always kind of just created things because we could. The digital space has always been moving at a neck-breaking pace, and we always have these notions of, oh, we'll go back and we'll fix it, right? And we've always said that about every single digital channel. Well, guess what? We always move really fast onto the next thing to create, and we don't have enough time to go back and fix it. Which is why at XRSI, we believe what we need to do is we need to act now, right? We can't just be consumers of good governance, of safety. We all have to participate. We all have to build this together, and that means that everybody needs to be involved, and it's everybody's responsibility. You have a unique perspective, all of us have a unique perspective, and the only way to make this work is to actually grow up, right, and start to own that space. Otherwise, we're going to be very passive, and we won't actually have the opportunity to be the type of consumers we want to be. So what I would say is, this is the opportunity to come together. We're certainly working to do that, but we invite everybody to join us because this is the moment in time where we can actually pivot in the right direction and make the right choices.
Amazing. And your statement, XR safety is a shared responsibility. I would totally echo that. And why is that? Because the research that we mentioned that I presented, I had the honor to present to CISO, we also included some consideration, especially at the global level. These are the considerations that we must think about. Because we sit out here in the valley, and a lot of the people are making decisions and trade-offs in the name of safety. Encryption is something that people trade off. Or in the name of child safety, we saw that with Apple's CSAM decisions, and then they backtracked it. We saw that with facial recognition decision from Meta, and then they backtracked it. So all these kind of decisions are made, and these are some of the global considerations. So we have last couple of minutes. I want to just ask each one of us as to what is the then potential solution. Dennis, I'm going to go over to you first. Then what is the key takeaway for our audience, for the global citizens? What is the solution here?
Right, so there are working groups. I mean, I know you're all busy people making your solutions and inventing new things every day. There's actually a working group, the Privacy Framework Working Group. We've been meeting for the last essentially 12-ish months, and there was a working group before that that established the 1.0 version of it. It's not something that I commit to even full time, and I learn so much every time I show up. And so the working group, basically the core idea there is to create a consortium of people across many different verticals that are contributing their insights, their mistakes, their successes to a privacy framework that then can inform organizations and countries as to what to do to safeguard our privacy using these immersive systems.
Exactly, and I'll add to that, we have the data classification framework, and there is a roundtable that's happening on 10th of December. Christina, you have something to add to that as well, right?
Absolutely. So we are really excited to announce that between the 6th and the 10th of December, we're going to actually be holding a safety week, a great time to get involved in whatever capacity you are, designer, developer, community member, parent, grandparent, just an interested party. Join us because there's always a role to play. And if you don't believe me, go across the hall to that exhibit space and ask folks not just about what are they thinking about when they're building the solutions and the products that they're building in terms of safety, ask them about accessibility, and then join us in December because we all have a voice to play in terms of how things move forward, and we obviously need to change.
Fantastic. Thank you. And I think, Lance, we could totally take questions.
Okay. So for our Q&A here, we have a couple of microphones up front. If anybody has any questions, please stand up, come to the mic. If you're super passionate about it, yell it out. We'd love to hear from you guys.
If anybody thinks that safety isn't sexy, by the way, or governance isn't sexy, which is what we got challenged with yesterday evening, challenge us again. We'll prove you wrong.
Please.
Yeah, you had mentioned that there was a framework that you had developed in order to manage the risk, and I'm wondering how that compares to, say, some of the other responsible innovation framework that have been out there and discussed in terms of a whole process of managing that type of risk and to engage with the audience and stuff. I'm just curious how your framework connects to that.
Sure. So I actually take a look at risk in the context of business always, right? And consider the fact that digital is there for a reason. If we wanted to obliterate all of the risk, right, and be completely safe, then we should all just take the day off and go home, right? And just don't create anything and we'll be perfectly safe. But that's not an option, right? And so it's really, really great that we're starting to have frameworks, I think, from an industry perspective, right? That's why we're all up here. But I think that within the business, we really need to create foundations for conversing about things like, what is the opportunity that we have, right? What is XR bringing to the table? How are we actually going to be making money? And what is the trade-off for that? What are the risks? What are we giving up? What are we asking you to give up in exchange? And understanding what that balance should be and being transparent with every user about that, right? So that they understand what kind of choices are being made by businesses. And that extends also to nonprofits and everybody else. And what I'm really challenging folks to do from a framework perspective is once you identify those risks and once we actually decide from a business perspective what to do about them, don't just create documentation, right? That's shelfware. It's a waste of everybody's time, right? It's about actually changing the organizations, changing the thought process, and how we go about acting on those policies or that framework. Right? So it's really about embedding that into the organization, disseminating that information, explaining to people why are we making the trade-offs that we're making? Where are we willing to compromise on safety, if at all, right? Or what is the right kind of step forward? As well as things like, where does innovation start and where does it stop? It's great to have innovation. We should all be innovating. We should all be creating. But once we realize we've created something or we have a tangible idea that's going to go to market, we need to kind of put our thinking hats on and go, wow, is this really ready for prime time? Is it safe? Is it ethical? Is it trustworthy? Is it the right thing? Which is why that framework isn't just about documenting policies. It's about making sure that they're disseminated into the organization, that we actually enable designers and developers to understand how to apply them, and ultimately to understand, are they effective? Right? So it's really about enabling and support, which is what everybody will tell you governance usually is not, right? Governance is supposed to be red tape. But it's about enablement, support, and making sure that you can go really, really fast and gain velocity and get maximum ROI while also ensuring that you've balanced that risk out and that you're not doing crazy things just because you can, which is how we've traditionally approached things.
I'd also add that from a risk perspective, the fact that, I think Kavya emailed like 900 different people across different countries and organizations and NGOs, policymakers. We had senators reaching back out to us. And so that consortium really helps, right? Rather than building it within a vacuum or siloed out, there's actually a group of people. Out of the 900, I think 200 got back to you, something like that. Right. And so that's a ton of work by a lot of people.
But still not enough, I would say.
Right, which is still not enough, exactly, which is why we're here talking to you all. And so getting their insights over time has really contributed to different perspectives on risk, essentially.
And I think, Kent, you asked, the other frameworks, how we are dealing with that. So we are really not trying to recreate the wheel. We adopt pretty much verbatim, like Australia's e-safety commissioner, We're working hand in hand with what they're developing as e-safety, online e-safety tools, e-safety by design, and we're just literally taking all of the prevention measures that they are building, applying the XR filters to it, and putting that in our framework. If people are working on, neural rights framework, we're literally adopting that. And then there is a medical XR safety and privacy framework. So a lot of these parallel efforts are going on to just kind of adopt these things. One thing I would say, and that's why we encourage all of you to sort of get involved. Wayne Gursky was said that, you miss out on every shot that you don't take. And so that's why we have to take this shot to protect the metaverse. And we are probably 2-3 years ahead, which is a good thing. So let's go with Wayne Gursky.
Yeah, and Gretzky also said, skate to where the puck is going, not to where it's been.
So let's go with the puck.
Perfect. Thank you, guys. Thanks for the questions. Thank you, Christina, Dennis, Kavya. Great to have you up here. We just tip of the iceberg with great conversation. Thank you. Round of applause for our
Thanks, everybody.
panelists here, please.
Thank you.
All right. We'll be back in about 4 or 5 minutes with the next session as we roll into ethics.